order. It's July 10th, 2023, 3 p.m. at the advertised location. Next order of business is Pledge of Allegiance. If you'd please stand and join us in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Our next order of business is citizen comments. I don't see any citizens, so I won't do the long introduction. Councilors, you were emailed a letter today with some comments from a concerned citizen, so if you haven't had a chance to review those, please look at those and respond accordingly. Next up, item number 4, discussion items. Please note that identifying an item as an action item does not require the City Council to vote on that item. Item A, deferred maintenance of facilities. We have a presentation from Ms. Valerie Warren. And Valerie, if you'd please come up to the podium there, introduce yourself for the record, and as always, remember to speak up clearly and loudly. You have a couple of microphones overhead. Welcome.
Good afternoon. My name is Valerie Warren. I'm the facility supervisor for the city. And I'm just following up today to come with some options from the deferred maintenance presentation that I gave you. I think it was in March. So with rising costs, maintenance is suffering, and when maintenance suffers, it affects our bottom dollar. So I have 2 options for you to solve this issue. I have done these before, this option with great success, so it's not a new process to me, and it's a proven method in the corporate world to solve maintenance issues. Before I get into those 2 options, there are still the 4 roofs, no matter what we do with those 4 buildings, that have to be repaired. I just got a report back this morning from some roofing consultants telling me just how bad they are, and they need repaired ASAP. Water's penetrating in each of the 4 buildings until repaired. So those, regardless of what we do, still need to be repaired, and that is a cost of $350,000 to $414,000, depending on whether we do like a 15-year or a 20-year, and a few other options in there. We redo the metal that doesn't necessarily need it, but that's rusting out, but it's not leaking, or just the patches that are leaking. So changes the price by about $75,000, depending on what you want to do. And then buildings that do not house our staff, that could be sold or removed from city properties, would save the city over $2 million in upcoming, very soon needed repairs. But those don't house the employees. So my plans come with the employees, okay? And we would review employee placement and structures to consolidate staff. So this would have several positive results. This first option is for 8 buildings to be consolidated into 1. So this 8 buildings housing different departments, consolidated into 1 building. This doesn't include buildings that we can sell, like the Bollinger building. I can get free furniture to help with these transitions, so we don't need any more furniture. We'd be able to auction off items that we don't need, which would be additional benefit to the public, such as extra copy machines, duplicate things you would have when you move multiple departments into 1 space. So some of the benefits of these are teamwork would increase. You have less travel time to talk, causing a decrease in vehicle and gas use. Consolidating would remove maintenance costs, utility costs, and put the building back into the tax base. This allows new businesses wanting to move to Lewiston to have more commercial options. We have some of the best commercial buildings in downtown. And then you would have a pretty substantial power, water, and sewer savings. And I did a quick look at some numbers I had from Avista and utility billing and things for these 8 buildings. The annual cost for those 8 buildings is around $170,000 for water, sewer, garbage, power. Moving everyone into one building could drop that to $100,000 or less. So it's pretty substantial savings in power and water use. Your total savings that would be removed from what maintenance needs to be done on those buildings is $5,692,520. So it's pretty substantial. It's nearly half of what I told you needed to be fixed. Some red flags that come up with that, it might take time to liquidate the properties, whether you lease them or sell them. We may need to modify the building we move into to accommodate the employees, so we might have to add an extra lobby or a wall here and there. It would require a larger building to move that accommodates the multiple departments. And we would need to surplus furniture, et cetera, that's no longer needed. So that'd be additional work. Option 2 is moving only a few departments and consolidating it into one building, but it's only moving 4 buildings. So there's multiple departments in those buildings, but only 4 buildings getting rid of. And teamwork would increase again, less travel time. Also for those, buildings go back to the community and the tax base. Maintenance for the buildings is removed from city expenses. And your power, water, sewer savings would be $50,000 to $75,000 a year for that option. Your total savings of not having to do the maintenance required on those 4 buildings is $2,197,500. Still a pretty significant savings. Red flags for that. Once again, it could take some time to liquidate the properties. We may have to modify the building we move people into to accommodate. We would need to surplus extra items. And, but I think that's about all the red flags that I could think of. We can cut our future urgent cost needs down by over half, leaving a more manageable amount to get done in a short period of time. New structure would be manageable to maintain with the current maintenance staff. We still would have to repair the buildings that cannot be moved, such as like the fire departments, and, those buildings we can't move the fire department out of. So those items that were listed for those buildings still need to get done. Do you guys have any questions? Yes.
You were talking about like these buildings that need repairs, like if a home, you're gonna sell the home, typically you're required to fix them up to a standard. Is that the same with the commercial building?
As far as I understand, yes. That's why the roofs have to be repaired, whether you keep them or not.
So those savings really wouldn't be there if we still had to repair them, correct?
You would, you would drop down to $5,200,000. The other items are items that have to be done, but they don't shut down a building. They're still financeable, because the walls have been painted inside for 20 years. The inspector doesn't care about that. They don't necessarily care about peeling paint or fascia that might be rotting. If it's falling off the building, they do. And that's all up to whoever purchases the buildings as far as asking for those things to be done. They can
More
ask.
Structural than cosmetic.
Correct. These are structural, yeah. The major structural is only half a million out of that 5.6.
Valerie, can you just clarify the 4 roofs, Fenton Gym?
Yeah, Fenton Gym, traffic, police training center, and fire station 4.
No, I'm looking, we've been looking at how we can possibly be cutting costs, and consolidation seems like a really good way to look at it. And possibly with a structure that is updated, that would save us money. I appreciate your value, the time that you spent on doing this and putting it together, and I think it's a great place to have this conversation, to continue it as we talk about possibly ways to save some money. But thank you.
Yes.
What's the staff buy-in on option 1 and option 2?
They are very, very excited about it. I did talk to everyone, and normally you get, in my past experience, you get people scared or unsure, or a lot of no's, but I haven't got one no. And I've only got excitement over it, which was wonderful.
Was the excitement a lot of what you already stated as far as not having to walk as much, the team aspect of it, to be able to build a better team, kind of?
Yeah, more teamwork, better fitting work environment that's a little bit nicer to work in, instead of one that needs work all the time. That's another reason. Some of the departments being able to put their teams in one area instead of having more spread out.
So I kind of got lost in your first part of it. So the consolidation, was that consolidated into an existing city building or a different commercial building? Is that where you got your numbers?
It could be either one. An existing commercial building that's probably not a city building might be better set up for this, if they've done the updates that would be needed. So one way you do that is take this room, for example. If you put everyone in cubicles instead of hard offices, you can fit 40 employees in here instead of 8. So it's a different furniture structure, different setup structure, putting people in cubicles instead of offices. Common area copy machines instead of each department having their own equipment or shared ones, or set it up multiple ways. Best use of space is kind of determines it. So until you have the building and can look at it for the best use of space, you can't really define it.
That cost with the possibility of, I mean, if we found a new building that we don't own currently, are we including how much that possibly could cost?
Nope.
To buy that
I
building?
have no idea what that would be. Yeah.
I guess my question too was, well, along with that, is you looked at what lease costs would be in comparison to what putting a bunch of them together would be.
Lease costs for us to lease a building, or lease costs?
Yes.
I do not know that answer either. Can't really get those answers till you have more defined parameters to talk to people about.
Definitely think that would be, I think it would be the next step forward, because that would determine whether the benefit of buying a new building is gonna be less than the cost it would be to repair the existing one.
Well, and you need to look at future costs too. So like the annual savings of $100,000 a year in water, sewer, garbage, and how many years, had those annual savings in there as well.
Yeah, the ROI, I understand that.
Questions?
I'm gonna keep you for 5 more minutes here, because I don't wanna let you off that easy.
Okay.
Because, councilors, we've talked about deferred maintenance again and again over the last year and a half. And at some point, I don't know if this says action item on it, but, yeah, at some point, we're gonna have to make some decisions about some of these properties. Regardless of whether we consolidate or not, do we keep these properties and sell them? You know, so this includes land that we have in the city. And we have some investments that we're probably gonna need to make sooner than later, such as Fire Station 2. You know, we've been told that that needs a couple more bedrooms and some work in the bathroom, stuff like that. I don't know if all of our generators are close. Does Fire Station 2 still need theirs? Yeah. So we have some big ticket items that you may be called upon to fund sooner than later, and that's a whole separate discussion, I think, from some of these things about consolidation. Consolidation brings a lot of its own benefits to doing that, and Valerie's outlined some of those. We've been in preliminary conversations about that potential and just asking around and getting information from folks to see what might be possible.
Now, but aren't the top 4 already on the proposed budget?
For repairs? I put several of these items, yeah, because they have to get done. Or we'll incur some real
Up for-
damage.
The top 4
Projects.
off our list that need to be done first were on the budget proposal that you put out.
Mayor, can we direct to go to look at possible buildings and what that might look like?
For
Cost.
consolidation?
Correct.
So, I think Valerie is gathering, certainly we can do that, you know, but I think Valerie is collecting some information on that already. And
Okay.
we've requested some, it's just probably not ready for prime time, you know, till we can confirm a few things. But we're looking at some options. As far as the deferred maintenance on that budget list, you certainly have the option to fund them or not fund them. But I think in addition to that, there's other needs that are gonna be out there that we need to make a decision. I don't think we can keep kicking the can down the road on these things, you know, because the longer it goes, the more money it costs us to maintain those assets healthy. So big decisions to make.
As a refresh, the emergency urgent items that have to be done in this next 6 months or so are these 4 roofs, some repairs to Fire Station 4 to meet code, the Carnegie Library boiler needs replaced before winter. It will not heat the building. Got City Hall chiller and boiler are failing. I've extended it and made it through the summer for the chiller, so that was good. But it's failing. It's just old. And the community center air conditioning for the main event rooms, air conditioner heater, the multi-zone unit. We cross our fingers every day that it keeps running. So those are all very emergent. You won't have heat or power or safe structure without repairing those.
So, what I hear is, we have to make a decision on whether we move forward on consolidation and firm up what that looks like. Is it the 8 buildings into one? If we have staff buy-in, I think that, you know, just thinking about how we have 2 meeting places, I'm not sure why. I think it's just tradition that work sessions are here and different things, but I think about, if we were to consolidate, that also gives the public one place to go, one-stop shop. I think that's a plus on top of the savings, but I also feel like when we talk about what we're gonna put in the budget, you know, fire stations, all operational fire stations have needs. You have the 4 roofs, and we have a building fund that's for capital improvements or purchases only, that we need to figure out what that can do long-term. And I think that right now, we have to make decisions that set us up that aren't going to bite us in the butt 3, 5, 10 years down the road, because we kick the can down the road. And so we've held on to buildings and said, well, we're just praying that the air will still work and the community center. We cannot keep doing that, because the more damage and replacement is more than fixes, or sometimes it's cheaper. These are the things I think we have to actively pursue. But it's hard for us, not knowing the 8 buildings, what does that look like? So I'm gonna need to see more detail before I would ever vote to make a decision. But I believe that's what we need to start doing. I think that we have a lot of opportunities to bring down the city's responsibilities to a manageable size for the staff, whereas right now I don't think we're there. Constantly spinning our wheels because the next big thing breaks or a building is having an issue. So I'm all for it. I just need to see it on paper with facts and figures so we can make the right decision.
Thank you. Out of the 8 buildings, there isn't one that can be upgraded to accomplish this.
The only building that I can think of that would house everyone that could be upgraded to accomplish it would be the community center. The only large enough one with already open spaces that could be cut up to accommodate multiple departments. But then you lose your event space for the city.
Thank you.
Which creates, I'm assuming, quite a bit of revenue that we'd be losing out on.
Is it a lot of revenue? You have senior nutrition that would have to leave an event, right? Is it?
Approximately 40,000 a year.
Okay, approximately 40,000 a year.
Is,
But it's also the public place together. Okay.
One thing I was gonna mention, and this might be more for anyone watching online, is a lot of times people think, well, let's just keep what we have. And they're thinking that because they're thinking it's more cost effective. But I heard a good analogy about a week ago. If you have a really cool Ford truck, one of those old red Ford trucks you see now in pictures all the time, and it's sitting there, you go, oh, cool, and we need to keep that. That's really cool. But if you're still driving the 1947 red truck every day, you're gonna have it in the shop every day to work on it. And so it's no longer a reliable source for your driving tool. That's an equivalent to these buildings. They're very old, so old buildings require a lot more maintenance. You can remodel them all you want, they're still going to require a lot of maintenance because the structure itself is old. Unless you completely gut them and redo all the plumbing, all the electrical, shore up the walls with steel and completely redo it, you do not have a new vehicle. So it's more cost effective to get the new vehicle versus keeping the old truck.
Councilor Clayburgh?
Well, what I'd offer is, this has been going on for a long time, talking about Fire Station 4 in the relocation. I'd be really adverse to putting a whole bunch of money into that building when we know it's gotta be replaced. This has been going on for 8 years. That money didn't just happen overnight. It came out of different budgets, so yes, we've got the money in our capital building fund or whatever. It can be used for other things, but the fact of the matter is, we still need a new fire station. I mean, I think the chief would agree, and where it's gonna go. I wasn't around for the meeting when that decision was made. But we need one. So to go spend that money on a bunch of roofs and then have to turn around and raise that kind of money again for new structure, I think is short-sighted and foolhardy.
Thank you. Okay, so we've talked about the 4 roofs, that's 4 of the buildings, and then you've talked about the community center, and that's obviously one of the 8 that you're talking about, or no?
Yes,
The community center is one of the 8. What are the other buildings?
just because of the cost of the HVAC units are very expensive.
Okay, so you're looking at, but your final option 2 was just do 4 buildings into one.
Yeah, the 4 buildings would be the main administrative buildings, so community development, public works, administrative buildings, city hall, and fire admin. The rest aren't included in that. Those are the 4. Because it makes most sense to move those groups of people rather than modifying their buildings into one space.
That makes sense. Okay, thank you for that.
I think it's important to differentiate between the 4 structures we're talking about putting roofs on to protect and the fire station, because we all who voted it down all said we acknowledge that we need a fire station, but that wasn't where it was gonna go at that time. So we've gotta come up with this. I mean, if we wanna maintain something, you need a roof that's gonna keep it, or it's gonna be further deteriorated, and then it's gonna become less of value. So that has to be done.
Counselor, and then we'll close after you.
And again, I agree that we don't wanna put a bunch of money in, but if we can't sell a building without fixing the roof, is how I understand it. No matter what, Station 4 needs a new roof. We would have to do it no matter what. So we're not building them anything new in the next how many ever months or years because we don't have a plan. This is still money that needs to be spent to make sure that we're up to code, and when we walk away from that building, we would need to do it anyway, right? And the longer we wait,
I'm not sure how that works where we lease that building. I don't know how that works. I just know on loans, you would have to have it fixed. A cash buyer, you can write out anything you want.
Flavor, do you want to close this out? Because we do have
Yeah.
to get to Dustin, Director Johnson.
Fire station up there is on leased ground. My understanding is, we built the building, we own the building, it's on leased ground. So you're gonna sell a building to somebody that's on leased ground, not knowing what the intention of that landlord is going to be down the road or whatever. It's not like it's a hot selling property.
Thank you, Counselor. Thank you, Valerie, for being here today.
Thank you, Valerie.
I would encourage any of the counselors to reach out to Valerie or Cam if you have questions. In the meantime, because we have to
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
keep it moving. Director Johnson, Bryden Avenue funding options. Item 4B, welcome. Please introduce yourself for the record.
Good afternoon, Dustin Johnson, Public Works Director, here to talk to you about Bryden. So a little history on it. Bryden corridor, so we're talking 4th to 7th, has been in the works for design, specifically just design. Planning efforts to go on far beyond that. We're wrapping up design. I did give just a general transportation update about 2 months ago, and one of the key takeaways from that presentation was to complete the Bryden corridor from 4th all the way to Thane, to fund it how it has traditionally been funded, which is through the surface transportation funds, would take I think roughly till 2053 to complete the design, right-of-way, construction, and then that's phase one, and then you start all over into phase two. And so I think most people in this room said if you're gonna start a project, you probably wanna complete it within, measure these by years and decades, not centuries. So I think it was Council Spickelmeyer who asked that we come back and talk about some funding scenarios. To be brutally honest, the funding scenarios aren't really different from what we have discussed in the past. Grants, STP funds, which will continue, franchise fees, which public voted on recently, general funds dedicated, that's what we've relied on in the past and will rely on in the future. Urban Renewal Agency can provide additional funding, but will not be a workhorse on funding for that. Another is public improvement bond, so you basically put that out to the voters and say, here's what the debt would be, do you want to do this project? They vote for it, kind of similar how we did with the water and sewer projects. We could do that specifically for a transportation project. The only other one that is used around in Idaho a little bit is a local improvement district, where you basically define the boundary, and I don't think this local improvement district's not in the technical memo that I provided, but a local improvement district, basically you define a boundary. It's pretty common for sidewalks. It wouldn't be typical for something of this large scope, but it could, again, bring in a little bit more revenue where basically the individual property owners fronting that road would say, okay, we're gonna have you pay for all or a portion of the sidewalk improvement. So you could get some revenue through that. And again, that would go through a public process where it could be protested out. And if it's protested out, that's not a revenue source. So generally, that's the scenarios that can be considered. One that is in the memo, and I will discuss a little bit, is the state of Idaho has about roughly $100 million statewide, and it's called the Strategic Initiatives Local Transportation Project Grant Program. They've split it into two different categories, and we are category one. They just split it 50-50. So category one, basically any cities with a population of 50,000 or an MPO, which we are, we would apply for grants. The grants would be up to $10 million. From the discussions we've had with the ITD and the other MPOs in the state are pretty positive. So I would say I think we have a pretty good chance of getting something, maybe not $10 million, maybe somewhere between 5 and 10, but encouraged that will be an opportunity that we can utilize for our projects. This just came out. I think the projects are due later this summer, or the applications are due later this summer. September 1st is the deadline for those, so it would be something that we would find out later after the budgets are adopted, but that would be an opportunity for us to apply. The only thing I would say with a caveat for that is it's a great opportunity. That's not going to solve all of our problems. Maybe that's what we use to solve Bryden, but we still have 21st, Thane, Main Street, some of these other principal arterials. Additionally included in this technical memo that was provided was kind of just some rough scenarios for you to kind of consider of if you inserted more money, say this one, I think we said, basically if you use, general fund, if you really wanted to get serious about it and say, scenario one was you dedicated $2 million a year. The other scenario, number two, was $1 million a year, and how fast that speeds up the timeline. I will say, these arterials, the condition that they are in, didn't get in overnight. We're not gonna get out overnight. So the more funds we dedicate, the faster we'll get out of the hole in the reconstruction process. And then scenario three was, utilizing the franchise fees, which, that's a policy discussion. If you wanted to take that to the voters again, and what the stipulations would be for taking it back to the voters. The only other one, so all the discussion so far has been generating more revenue to these projects. Scenario four, for consideration, is it's a 5-lane section that's being designed right now. This has been the section that's been considered for quite some time, and I don't know, this not just predates me, but maybe even predates me being a professional engineer, of why did we go with a 5-lane section rather than a 3-lane section? And, so this is probably 20 years we've been considering, or at least 15 years considering a 5-lane section. Could we go back, look at a 3-lane section? How much design life would that buy us based off of traffic volume? It could be a short discussion, say, well, all these intersections would fail or in 10 years, so we wouldn't want to invest a significant amount of money if all those intersections are gonna fail in 10 years. But essentially, we could go back and we could look, we could say, we complete the design for the 5-lane section, we go back, have the engineers look at the models and say, this is, because the benefit of a 3-lane section is you take a significant amount of right-of-way acquisition out of that. It's already a 3-lane section. You would just essentially be putting in curb, gutter, sidewalk, exactly what you got there, replace, the failing pavement, address the water, which is Lloyd, underneath the pavement, and you've got a new road. It doesn't really buy you any more capacity. I mean, there's some tweaks we could make for turn lane. There's already a center turn lane, but some tweaks, some efficiencies in there. We could consider roundabouts, looking at those different ways of how you could make that road function better without acquiring additional right-of-way. So that's scenario 4 of just cut back and spend, instead of finding more revenue, cut back on the expense. So that's basically the gist of the memo. I'm looking for some direction from you as how we should proceed ahead. In the short term, I guess, before I hand it back over to you, is we will complete the design for Bryden Phase 1. That will be finalized calendar year of '23, and relying the sole source of revenue for this project is STP funds. We will not have enough STP funds. Those are dedicated for Snake River Avenue and 8th Street grade. So we will not start on Bryden until 2030, when we'll start acquiring right-of-way, pending any additional revenue from the state of Idaho grant. So now I will stop.
Counselors, yes.
When I went to the open house, right, we had that open house, and kind of listening and overhearing citizens and concerns, a lot of them didn't really seem that excited about the 5-lane anyway. I mean, and even a majority of business owners were not really for it. So it seems like a feasible solution to try to look at, like you said, maybe a 3-lane, and how can we still make it more efficient, but maybe not going out that many lanes.
Yeah, I don't have a preference because I don't know the data. The biggest concern I have is looking, and I understand why the neighbors wouldn't want a 5-lane section, and I think that was the letter in your packet, was not supporting of the 5-lane section. And I don't have an answer regarding that. The only thing I do want to address is Lewiston struggles having enough, arterial capacity going east-west. The bulk of our arterials run north-south, and so as we continue to grow to the southeast, we're gonna need to provide more arterials to get people so they can get to where they want without congestion. And so once your arterials start getting congested, people are gonna start finding alternative ways to get to their house, cutting through local streets, speeding, all those other things. And so, is a 5-lane section Bryden the answer? I don't know. But if it isn't, we need to find the best way to get traffic on an arterial, or at least a collector, to go as we're going out this direction.
Counselor Lutke?
Okay, I just need to clarify. So the design plan will be completed in 2023 based off of the 5-year, or the 5-lane idea.
Yep.
It'll be a 7-year-old plan by the time we start work on it, going off of the STP funds. So there are no funds being put together for this right now.
Currently, no, and that goes for the same of Snake River Road Snake River Avenue has been completed, and its design's on the shelf, same with 8th Street grade. And so as we're trying to put too many projects with, I think it's $800,000 a year we're allocated in funds. And if you look at the cost of these projects, as they complete the preliminary designs and concept designs, move through design, right-of-way acquisition, the truck's going farther away from you as you're chasing it just with the change of as more users of it, inflation, and so yes, you're hitting the nail on the head of to solely utilize STP funds for these large projects, you're never gonna catch up.
Just quick follow-up, so where does the URA come in and who paid for the plan? The design plan's been paid for?
The URA, so that's the Bryden Avenue URA. Their URA has been paying the local match, so there's this STP funds are 92 point something percent, so there's like a 7.5% local match, and the URA has been paying for that local match for the design costs. And so if you do the math, it's roughly $1 million that we've spent on design for the Bryden Avenue, so whatever, 7.5%, that's what the URA has paid to date. And I know there's a separate agreement that the URA has with Lloyd, talking about with their water improvements. And so generally, we're kind of waiting to finalize the design right away, and then talking about, working with Lloyd, whatever improvements they need to make below the surface before then we start ripping the road out, so they don't have to do it afterwards.
Councilor Schroeder was next.
Thank you. Thank you, Dustin. You always come with good thoughts for us. To take a look at a 5-lane down to a 3-lane, I would wanna still have them look at what the whole plan for Bryden is, so we don't have a bottleneck sitting here that we paid money for. So if the whole plan is gonna create a bottleneck, then I would not. But I would encourage you to ask them to do that. I
Yeah,
don't
and
know
I
what the
could-
cost is.
I again, haven't talked to anybody as far as what modeling they would wanna do, what's already been done, what we can do moving forward. So I don't wanna volunteer anything out there, but that definitely, I don't wanna say, yeah, we can give you a 3-lane section, we're gonna save $2.5 million in right-of-way, but we're gonna have to rebuild the road and buy that right-of-way anyway at 2035 prices. So that would not be something that I would,
So,
Councilor Townsend.
Thank you. So I'm just trying to understand. So the money that's been leveraged that is being put away, the STP funds, 7.5% has been put in by URA.
for the local match, yeah.
Yeah, so if the URA didn't exist and we didn't have that, then those funds would not necessarily be available to us?
No, so typically, any other STP project, the city, it would come out of our street funds.
I see.
Yeah, so
Street
the
funds.
URA has stepped in and that's I'm not quite sure that, exactly, but that URA district is not old, so it doesn't have a lot of funds. I'm not gonna go into the details because I don't know, but, yes, the URA, we would be paying that out of our transportation
Sure.
funds. The URA just picked that up.
Bryden Canyon, when that was put in, and maybe you can help with this, it seems like there's been people who've talked about there were promises that were gonna be made within a certain amount of time that would tie Bryden Canyon so that it wasn't creating a bottleneck. Do you remember anything like that at all?
Quite a bit.
What can you tell us to help with that?
Well, they built the road right up to the top of 4th Street, and with no acquisition of any right-of-way between 4th and 5th, that is where the bottleneck is.
Yeah. And I'm reading letters that people have sent in and one of the things we all know is transitions in life are hard, whatever it is. They're hard. And Bryden and the people who've lived on that avenue for years, decades maybe, it's transitioning. And that's difficult for them. And we want to make it something that they can have an appreciation for, and also that the city is going to be able to do something. And because, when people cannot get to work as fast as they think they need to, they're gonna find other options and think that's the best route. And sometimes those aren't the safest for their fellow citizens. So, just observations. I'm not sure where to go with this, but, we need more money, right?
Isn't that the tune of every conversation?
Yeah.
Councilor Kleberg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think the thing with, staying with a 3-lane, it has some merit. I'd like to see what the overall design plan would be. Problem that I think is, we've got almost 19,000 vehicles per day going up and down. But the intersections, particularly the controlled intersections, they're getting overwhelmed. And that's why you have a queue of, might be 50 cars at 7th and Bryden.
Yeah, I looked, at the top of the hill, I think it is 19,000 or there, it's 26,000 that cross the bridge every day, and by the time you get to 7th, it's down to 16,000, but that's,
That's a chunk of.
that's a lot of cars.
Schroeder?
Thank you. We have those current plans for a 5-lane. That was at our outreach, wasn't it?
That's the design that's being
Correct.
completed now. So
Okay. Okay, it was.
that is, as they say, shovel ready, excluding the right-of-way purchase.
So we have that to see. My other question, and whether I would like your input as well on this, but I kind of feel like we didn't do well on the Avista. And I personally think if we did a better campaign, we can get this approved. I just feel that we felt like we were bound and could not say words. And so the public thought we weren't even we weren't supportive of it. And I am totally supportive of Avista fees, and I would take it to the 3%. But have you had input as to how people felt about it, or whether we did a good job?
I don't know. It kind of weighs, as we've talked about, the street network has been, in my opinion, underfunded. And so to dig out of that hole, or stop digging the hole and get yourself out of the hole, we need more. I agree with Councilor Towsley, we need more money. Whether it comes from a Vista franchise or property taxes or grants or whatever. I'm not here to dictate policy. From my personal standpoint as a professional engineer, you can look at that and say 1% to 3%. And if you were able to bond that, and even if you put it on the ballot language saying every dollar that's generated from this window will go specifically to this road project, then we'll sunset the franchise fee back to 1% when that's completed, and then we can go back out at that time if necessary. But, there's ways to be creative with the ballot language and how that revenue is put in there. And I guess it goes back to I don't want to build a project the public doesn't want. I know it will never be 100% for or against, but if they don't want these improvements, then I don't need the revenue. But I think generally the public has been very clear, they want to see these arterials to be reconstructed and brought up to a better standard.
And the way we passed the bond was through education. Truly education. And we did not do that on this last Avista. So I think that we need to educate ourselves in order to educate the public and to get that Avista fee approved. That's my feeling on it. And I feel very strongly, having gone through the bond issue, and we had a very high percentage of approval on that. And it was just through education.
And you're talking about the water sewer one?
Yes. I was very much involved in that. And I think that is why we won that bond.
Councilor Spickmeyer?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess one of the reasons I brought this up is we've kicked this down the road. We've kicked the fire station down the road, the deferred maintenance. And you can't do them all. You gotta pick one and get one done, move on to the next, and not inundate the public with taxes. So I think the decision is, we need to decide which one we're gonna do, move forward, quit trying to move 3 of them along and nobody's happy. And I think your thing with the thing, you looked at the total voters, what was it, 4,000 or something like that
Yeah,
for the Vista?
so see,
Great turnover.
no education, so we really need to educate.
Councilor Lidke?
I agree that we did not get the message out, but we also had some catastrophic things happen that took the attention of the mayor and the staff, which I think it was a smart move to get it on the ballot, get people talking, but I agree with Council Spickelmeyer that this is not the water sewer conversation anymore with our residents. At that time, they weren't seeing $200 a month property tax hikes on our elderly community who is now at the point where they are looking at moving out. We're not seeing realtors report that people aren't even looking at properties in Lewiston anymore because of our property taxes. And so for us, I think this is twofold. If we want to educate them on why we would do this and give a dedicated fund, which is why I'm supportive of that, and the shift to where government entities beyond federal would be paying into it, nonprofits, et cetera. But also that we make some smart decision with this budget to take and offer some relief to them, because I don't think they're gonna just, with education, say, sure, well, you can charge us more. I think they need to see that we are doing what we can to cut costs so that they see that this is a shift to dedicate funds to much needed infrastructure, but here's where we've taken from the budget and made those so that you're not being hit again. And you can say $3 a month all you want, $3 a month has become a huge deal for a lot of people, and we need to take that into consideration.
Councilor Forsman.
Just to piggyback off that, I know I had people reach out to me a lot about the franchise fee, and I tried to share to the best of my abilities of what it would mean. But a lot of them are frustrated, obviously, like Hannah says, with property taxes and the user fee now coming up. And so I think they just feel like we've constantly have given them something new and more to pay, and not to mention just overall in our country, our economic times aren't the best. And so maybe doing another outreach might be good. I don't know if we could do one prior to even putting a vote out there and saying, hey, this is what it would be, so at least we can. My concern with bringing it up again, obviously so closely, is that the voters would be like, didn't you get the hint the first time? We don't want it. And that was kind of some of the tone I got from letters that we're already receiving of why we're still talking about it, or it already got voted down. So that's my biggest concern with just bringing it up so closely together. But maybe if we did it in a way where we're just first talking education, then maybe bringing it to ballot at a later date, maybe they would take it a little better, but that's my biggest concern with that.
I just have one question. I could ask, just to get a price from the design engineer doing Bryden, to just do a quick and dirty analysis of what a 3-lane section would look like. Is that, I mean, I can come back and say it's gonna cost X to do the analysis. Is that something that council would like me to proceed ahead? Or do you wanna scrap the 3-lane and stick with the 5?
Well, I think, Director, that it's not marked as an action item, so I don't know that we can give you that advice today, but it's certainly something that we've all heard. Yeah. Probably give you some individual feedback if councilors would like to do that. Councilor Spickelmeyer?
I did have one more question I'd forgotten. On the federal funds you're talking about, that could be, you said 5 to 10. So how long would the city have to use that?
We were actually trying to figure that out. We're looking into that because it says it wanted to move projects quickly, and we're looking through the scoring criteria, and Bryden checks a lot of boxes, but right away was one where it wouldn't score very high because we're short quite a bit. So I don't know if there's a set deadline on it, but we're fully aware that right-of-way acquisition would take time. How long, it depends on how the negotiations go.
To follow up on that, have you looked at the criteria and compared it to other street projects that are high ranking? So we're ready to move on the application process no matter what direction we take.
Yep. We have 3 STP projects, Snake River, 9th Street grade, and Brighton. All 3 of those are pretty prime because they're the only 3 street projects that we have designed and ready to go. And so that's why we're looking at that, saying all three of these have benefit, but we wanna make sure, like, those projects are, roughly maybe $4 million, but the two smaller ones. And so we don't wanna say, we're applying for Snake River Avenue, and we short ourselves, when they will award up to 10 million, well, here you go, you can have your 3 million, and we're gonna give the rest to Coeur d'Alene or whatever. So we don't wanna do that, but we can apply for as many projects as we want. We're just now trying to figure out which ones make the most sense to apply for and what ranking. They want them ranked, so.
Just to clarify, the $100 million grant process has to be associated with the SDF projects.
The 50, they broke them out. The ones that are in the qualify for STP funds, and then the ones that are not. They don't have to be STP funds. So if you're a larger, say like Coeur d'Alene or Nampa, they may have projects that are shovel ready that aren't attributed just because they're larger and growing. They have more projects. So they don't have to be STP funds, but the way we funded them, those are the ones that we're gonna have funded. That are gonna fit that $10 million price tag that we're shooting for.
Councilors, what I'm gonna say is I don't think we're ever gonna be in a position where we have enough money to do all that we need to do. And so, whether it's property taxes, franchise fees, or something else, in my opinion, we're gonna have to be very assertive in that process and, not back down. Got a stormwater fee coming online soon, which I won't discuss, but, there's other things that are gonna compete with those dollars. There's always a reason why we're not gonna fund something, but we have a lot of needs. And it's right here before us. Joe says, get her done. Thank you, Director.
Thank you.
All right, councilors, we have 5 minutes to go through the rest of this here. Unfinished and new business, city councilor comments. Given for later, okay, city boards, commission, mayor comments, none. Agenda topics, none. Motion to adjourn.
Make
motion
to.
Second. It's been moved by Councilor Kleber, second by Councilor Taussig. To adjourn, those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? They're adjourned. Thank you.